1227, Europe was about 5 minutes away from becoming a Mongol theme park when suddenly, plot twist, the Mongols turned around and left. Just like that. Seriously, they had crushed the Kingdom of Hungary, outmaneuvered Europe's best knights like they were toddlers in tin cans, and were one step away from making Gothic cathedrals yurt adjacent. Then they just stopped. Why? Because the great Khan died, and Mongol tradition required all princes to return home to elect a new leader. Imagine nearly conquering an entire continent, then calling it quits because you had a family meeting. But what if they didn't turn back? What if Batu Khan said, "You know what? Grandpa Genghis would want me to finish this." Europe could have been absorbed into the Mongol Empire, rewriting history as we know it. Would we be speaking Mongolian instead of English? Would the Renaissance happen in Mongolia instead of Florence? Would democracy and capitalism even exist? Or would we all be drinking fermented mare's milk and debating Genghis Khan's leadership on Mongol Twitter? Let's find out how close we came to living under the rule of the great Khan. The moment that changed everything. Europe's luckiest coincidence. The Battle of Mohi was a disaster, if you were European. Mongol archers rained arrows with inhuman accuracy, their cavalry moved like shadows, and their generals used tactics that made European warlords look like kids playing Risk. The Mongols didn't fight fair, they fought to win. European knights, too slow, too heavy, too predictable. Mongol horse archers, fast, agile, and able to turn European war horses into expensive lawn ornaments. European battle formations, easily manipulated. Mongols faked retreats, lured their enemies into traps, then annihilated them. Hungary collapsed, Poland was next in line, and Western Europe had zero counterplans except maybe praying harder. Then, without warning, poof, the Mongols left. They heard the great Khan had died, and by Mongol tradition, all high-ranking leaders had to return home for the world's deadliest boardroom meeting. Europe had just been saved by a logistical technicality. But let's say they don't turn back. Let's say Batu Khan keeps going. Europe could have been transformed into a Mongol satellite state, and history would have taken a much wilder ride. A Mongol Europe, politics, power, and probably more horses. Let's be clear, the Mongols wouldn't have wiped out Europe. That's too much work. They weren't interested in mass destruction. They were interested in efficient domination. They didn't erase cultures. They absorbed them. They didn't demand assimilation. They demanded taxes. They didn't care what god you worshipped, as long as you paid tribute on time. Imagine European kings not being overthrown, but kneeling before the great Khan, keeping their crowns as vassal rulers. Basically, Europe becomes a Mongol franchise. The Vatican, still standing, but the Pope now needs a Khan's approval before throwing excommunications around. Cathedrals, right next to Buddhist temples, Islamic mosques, and Mongol shamanist shrines. Trade, exploding because Mongols loved trade more than a medieval Black Friday. And let's not forget the Mongol postal system, the yam. Imagine sending a letter from London to Beijing and getting a reply within weeks, not years. That's right, Europe gets Amazon Prime, Mongol style. But this isn't just about politics. It's about how an empire like this would shape the world. Would the Renaissance still happen? Yes, but with extra Mongol flavor. The Renaissance was all about rediscovering knowledge, except in this timeline, that knowledge never got lost. The Mongols connected Europe directly to China, Persia, and India through trade. Gunpowder, the compass, and advanced mathematics reached Europe centuries earlier. Instead of Europe rediscovering Greek philosophy, it gets mixed with Confucian ideals and Buddhist logic. So what does that look like? Da Vinci's notebooks, filled with Mongol engineering ideas and Chinese inventions. Gutenberg's printing press, inspired by Mongolian relay messengers and Chinese movable type. European art, a fusion of Western realism and Eastern calligraphy. Instead of Florence, the Renaissance ignites in Prague, Paris, or Constantinople, with scholars debating Buddhist metaphysics alongside Greek logic. But hold on, what happens to European power? The power shift, say goodbye to the age of exploration. Under Mongol rule, Europe becomes just another province in a vast Eurasian empire. Trade, dominated by the Mongols. Scientific innovation, controlled by the Mongols. Power, flowing eastward. This means no Columbus, no Magellan, no voyages across the Atlantic. Why? Because Europe doesn't need to explore when it's already connected to Asia's wealth. Instead of sailing west, European merchants make fortunes under Mongol protection, and the Americas remain undiscovered. Imagine that, the Aztecs and Incas surviving into the modern age, untouched by European conquest. World history? Permanently altered. A new economic order. Capitalism, but make it Mongolian. The Mongols weren't just warriors, they were economic masterminds. They encouraged free trade, they established banks and credit systems, they introduced paper money centuries before Europe figured it out. This means that capitalism still emerges, but it's mixed with Mongol and Confucian ideas of communal wealth. Banks, Persian-influenced. Guilds, run on Mongol trade laws. Industrial revolution, powered by gunpowder tech and hydraulic engineering. Europe becomes rich, industrialized, and powerful, but in a totally different way. But empires always fall. So, what happens when this one does? The collapse and its aftermath. Europe rebuilds, but different eventually. The Mongol Empire fractures, just like it did in history. Civil wars break out, succession disputes weaken the empire, local rulers gain independence. Except this time, Europe doesn't re-emerge as we know it. Kings now rule using Mongol military tactics. European states function like tributary networks instead of feudal kingdoms. The Renaissance and Enlightenment still happen, but they're influenced by centuries of Mongol governance. This means democracy is delayed, capitalism is different, and the world is way more Eastern influenced than Western dominated. Would modern civilization still exist? Absolutely. Would it look anything like the world we know? Not even close. Final thought. The Europe that almost was Europe got incredibly lucky in 1227. One Mongol retreat saved an entire continent from being permanently rewritten. If they had stayed, we'd be living in a Mongol-influenced world where Europe is part of a vast Eurasian empire. The Renaissance has Buddhist, Persian, and Confucian influences. The age of exploration never happens. History as we know it doesn't exist. What do you think? Would this have been better, worse, or just different? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit like if this rewrote history in your brain, and subscribe for more mind-blowing alternate timelines. What if the Mongols conquered Europe?